We'd like to welcome you to the Heart Leader Podcast, where heart and mind align. I'm your host, Amber, and I'm here with co-host Austin, and we'd like to know, do you have a passion to make a greater global impact? Are you ready to embrace leading with heart and love? If so, join us on this journey to become heart leaders who change the world. Each episode brings heart-centered connection, building stronger relationships, communities, and businesses. Let's take a deeper dive into what it means to be heart leaders. The Heart Leader Podcast starts now. Hi, and welcome to the Heart Leader Podcast. I am your host, Amber, and I am here with co-host Austin, and we are kicking off a new theme in a new month. And our theme this month is all about giving and receiving. We are heading into a holiday season, at least here in the United States. And as we head into that holiday season, we really do kind of get caught up in this whole rush of giving. And it's a wonderful thing, but we also have this need to receive sometimes to keep things balanced, especially as heart leaders, which is what this podcast is all about, putting out into the community. It's a great time, easy for me to say, philanthropically, to go out and just give so much as far as charity and your heart and really reach out into the community. But how important is it to take time to receive, even if it's from self, to nurture yourself and to really take time for you? So those are some of the questions that we're going to dive into as we kick off this theme for the month. So, Austin, let's start there.
Yes.
You and your family are very big about giving back to the community and being engaged in the community.
Yeah.
So when we talk about balancing giving and receiving, what comes to heart for you right out of the gate?
It's a great question. Out of the gate, and I feel like it's not just because of my family. I think it's honestly because of society and where maybe most people are at, where initially when I think giving and receiving, I think of like gifts. And I think of whether it's giving a gift to someone or receiving a gift, or maybe it's a charity, maybe it's donating. And that could be money, that could be supplies or whatever is needed. And so it is funny because the first thing that comes is some sort of physical thing.
Yeah. And when we do focus on the giving of physical things, it's a wonderful thing because we're in a physical experience. And, I know when we had Bob Yule on, he was talking about Maslow's hierarchy of need. And physically, we have needs, and those needs include food, water, shelter, all of those types of things. But some of the things I feel like get overlooked is that energetic need,
right?
That replenishing of our energy, taking time to ourselves, especially when we talk about all of the celebrations and the things that are occurring, at least here. And I know in many other countries, toward the end of the year, there are all kinds of celebrations that occur.
Right.
And it's wonderful to have the time for these celebrations. But how often do we then tend to forget to take that time for self and receive that self-care? And when we go back to being that heart-centered leader of a family or even leading our own lives, how much do we miss signals from our body? Signals from our soul when we start getting so caught up in things outside of ourselves with all of the giving.
Absolutely. And what a time to reflect at the end of the year, to really dive into that And I mean, I'm sure most people are spending all year long giving. And so one of the benefits of this holiday season, whether you're in the United States or anywhere around the world, as you were saying, most people around the world are celebrating sometime in November, December, January, even into February. Yeah. And so that calendar year, as it's flowing, we're kind of coming into that standpoint where at least it's been months where people have been giving and giving and giving. And so, yes, we are physical and our experiences are very physical and we're used to that. And we're maybe giving of ourselves through our doing. But I really do feel like you're spot on here. I mean, this is such an opportunity to reflect and really feel, not just think, but actually feel through, how to balance giving and receiving, not just to the body or physically, but mentally. Mm-hmm. How are we thinking? How are we receiving thoughts? How are we giving thoughts about others or about ourselves? Emotionally, how are we feeling? Whether things are coming from the outside to the in or the inside to the out, how are we processing that emotion? And then spiritually, how are we connecting to the most authentic version of ourselves? Are we taking time to make sure they're aligned? Sometimes when we're so caught in the doing, are we taking that step back and remembering that we are human beings? And that human is just an adjective describing the type of being that we are. And we get so caught up in the human part, which gets us into the doing. We need to remember, no, first and foremost, we're the being part.
Yeah. Well, and going back to that human part, we are human and we're all on this journey of experiencing ourselves as human.
Yeah.
But even in the giving and the receiving of that, we forget that we're all on that same journey.
Right.
And we don't give each other credit for how challenging that journey can be. We understand from our perspective, but we don't bond and unite and give and receive each other that credit from each other for the fact that at the end of the day, we are all human. And we are all on this journey of experiencing ourselves as being human.
Right.
So when we talk about things like taking a step back and looking at how we're giving and receiving as heart leaders, one of the core places you can start is just there. How are you giving and receiving from that awareness or from your perspective of what it's like to be human? Understanding that everyone else is experiencing being human too, the same trials, the same challenges, the same beauty, the same world in a way. No matter where we are located on this planet, we all know what it's like to hear a bird sing. And we can receive that beautiful song. And we can give gratitude, going back to November's theme. We can give gratitude for that song.
Definitely. Well, isn't give just an acronym for gratitude and various experience?
Yeah. And so when we talk about this whole giving and receiving this month, yes, it's very important whether you're executing a business or you're in the community or you're in your family. But it's equally as important to remember as a collective, especially as a collective, to give and receive from that place of humanity, the humanity within us. And so let's start there. If you were to take a step back and just look at the humanity within you, what are some ways that you could give and receive from that space?
Wow. I can't claim to have ever been asked that question before. I love that. Right now, I feel like the last time that we spoke, we talked about how people just desire to be seen or desire to be heard in this world where the perception is one of a lot of chaos, a lot of disarray, a lot of disconnection. In a world that's so connected, why are we so disconnected at the same time? It's crazy, right? Yes. So I feel like one of the greatest gifts that we could give right now is one of listening, one of holding space, one of true presence when someone is actually talking, because that person may just want to be heard. They may just want to be seen for exactly who they are and what they're experiencing in that moment. I don't know what could be more human connected than that. Like, what could be a greater essence of our humanity than recognizing the humanity in someone else?
Agreed. And from the other side of that, receiving it. Mm-hmm. When someone is providing you that space and listening, being willing to share, so that we talked about vulnerability a bit already in this podcast, but being willing to show up authentically and be vulnerable and share that part of yourself, that humanity, not needing to say, oh, I'm fine. It's fine. We're good. It's fine. But being willing to express what's really occurring in your life. And if it really is fine, that's good. But how is it fine? What is occurring that's making your life beautiful? And that maybe the other person who is holding space and hearing from you, maybe they need to hear that from you. They need to recognize that life can be beautiful and to feel that with you, so that it then provides hope for them. I know one of the tools that we're going to provide this month is the Giving and Receiving Journal.
Absolutely.
And you've used this journal yourself.
I have.
Can you tell us a little bit about how you used it and the benefits that you got from it?
For me, being able to actually write down the different things that I either gave or received each day was at first a challenge, because I was so stuck in the physical side of things, especially as, your partner. It would be hard for me. It was hard for me to think about, I didn't get Amber anything today. What can I give her? I didn't give her a gift. What am I giving her that day? And so the first couple of days, I was so in my head and not in my heart. And it was such a realization of how out of balance of giving I was, because I was so focused on the physical aspect of giving and receiving. And so I feel like that was a huge reflection point for me, and at the same time, a huge benefit for me, because I realized where I was lacking and where I could actually really grow in this area. And so as I really started to dive into it and start writing things out of giving and receiving, what I wrote down changed from week to week to week as I expanded my awareness of what giving and receiving included. And that was everything from, like I was just talking about, being able to just hold space and be there for you. Or just, it could even be, maybe you just needed a hug in that moment. Or maybe just to be told, I'm really proud of you, Amber. And I know I'm just using you as an example right now because
that's okay.
You're amazing. But even the giving and receiving towards other people in my life, whether it was in business, whether it was family, whether it was friends, maybe it was just a few minutes on the phone with someone I hadn't talked to in a while. Just to listen, just to be there. And then from that point, after a few more weeks of that, then it actually started to go internally. I realized that it was all about outside of myself. It took me a while to truly realize, what am I giving myself here? What am I receiving from myself? And oftentimes that could be a cycle in and of itself. I mean, we work so hard. And so just taking that time for self-care, and that could be in so many forms. I mean, that could be, those days when you just need to just sit on the couch and binge watch some Netflix. But it could be going out and, exercising, or it could be, for me, playing golf or playing pickleball or going hiking or something like that. Those kind of things that I realized I wasn't really writing down. And so it was through that process that I was actually able to adjust my behaviors to make sure that that is a priority every single week. And that no matter what's going on in my life, I'm able to give and receive to myself and create that balance within. And in return, it allowed me to find more balance in how I give and receive towards others outside of me. Yeah. And it's one thing to give, but it is another thing to receive outside of yourself. And that could be as simple as a compliment. Could be as simple as just a caring thing. If someone says, "Oh, you did that well." And, sometimes it's immediate thoughts. "Oh, no, I didn't."
And how frequently does that happen?
So much. I didn't even realize how often I dismiss kind words.
Yes.
Not because I wasn't grateful that I was getting them, but because it was hard for me to hear.
Yeah. It goes back to self-love and self-worth.
Yeah.
And so the practice of giving and receiving can actually help boost that self-love. Because the moment, and I noticed this with you, and I definitely noticed it with me, the moment I stopped saying, no, and I started, instead of saying no, I just started saying, thank you. That was one of my practices of receiving, right?
Yeah.
Was to stop saying no when someone gave me kind words. Instead, to shift my pattern and simply say thank you, to receive with gratitude, which is why we really put these two side by side. Receive with gratitude. Because if not, you're taking away the other person's opportunity to give. We all know what that feels like when you so desire to give somebody something and they refuse to receive it.
Yeah.
It's like hitting your head up against a brick wall. You so want to show them love, but they aren't in a space to receive it. And that's okay. But if we could open ourselves up to being willing to just receive it, then it helps us open ourselves up to feeling the love and creating that cyclical flow as we talk about. So with the giving and receiving journal, I would, from my side, I would write down how often I receive those kind words. And I noticed you did the same thing. And it started breaking down my barrier of just saying, no, I cannot receive those words. And instead, it opened me up to that flow. And then I had more to give, and I could receive and give and receive and give.
That's beautiful. How do you feel that scaled in your life? How did you see that shift, from that daily small practice? How did that adjust how you design your life? How you give and receive what you're seeking to put out into this world and receive back? What did that do for you? Do you mind diving into that a little bit?
Not at all. Thanks for asking.
Yeah.
It has to start with the small steps, I feel. And that's how we learn to walk, right? We crawl, and then we take small steps, and we don't come out and just take off running. And our ego is very much the same way. If we start out by not even being able to hear kind words, then we're likely not going to have that confidence to love ourselves enough to know our truth, who we are, who our authentic self is. Yeah. So then how do we know how we desire to show up in the world? And once we know that, then how are we going to mirror that back out to the world to then create what we desire to create within it? And so for me, it was that kind of flow of, okay, I'm going to start with gratitude, then I'm going to receive with gratitude, and I'm going to give with gratitude. Mm-hmm. And then that opens up to me knowing, all right, I have the confidence to start diving into who I am and what I desire, mm-hmm. and how I desire to present that, not in an ego-centered way, mm-hmm. but in a self-loving way, where I love self and I love you. It doesn't have to be separate. It is both. It isn't an either or, it is an and it is always an and. Mm-hmm. By loving myself, I love you. By loving you, I love myself. And so then it continued to grow from there. And I knew that there couldn't be a separation. And it created this whole desire within me to build this movement of love that we now have set in motion, because there are all of these qualities that start to build upon the other, that build upon the other, that build upon the other. Mm-hmm. And when you see the strength that comes from that, not only the strength within, but how it builds unity within your immediate circle. And then how that builds unity within their immediate circle, builds unity within their immediate circle. Then you see the strength that comes from starting to practice all of these different, what we call the key attributes, and to really embody them. Not just know that they're there, not just kind of talk about them, but to really embody them and to have these little practices like the giving and receiving journal, so you can take a step back and go, okay, what is balance in giving and receiving for me? Is it that I give more than I receive and that's okay? Or do I need to take some time to receive a little bit more because I am just so exhausted from giving so much? And I know that that's one of the places where you started. Yeah. You were exhausted because you had given so much of yourself. So can you talk a little bit about the process that you went through to kind of balance yourself back out and find your equilibrium between giving and receiving?
Definitely. I feel like a lot of people will relate to this because it seems to be a common thread when talking to people about giving and receiving. I know you and I have had these discussions for years. From my understanding, at first, it was that the best way to be loving is to be giving, is to be almost sacrificial of yourself.
Yeah.
And we are taught that on so many levels. And so that was, just like anything, there's obviously beauty in that, of course, because there was much that was given, and that's a beautiful thing. But at some point, when we give so much that we start to lose ourselves, or we feel lost within ourselves, and we feel empty, we can't give anymore. And then that affects the whole goal, the whole purpose of what we're seeking to do in that moment. I know you always shared this incredible story, or even analogy about kind of the secret to self-love. And that's being that overflowing pitcher of water. If we're a pitcher of water and that's all we are, right? And we just give that water to another cup and another cup and another cup, eventually that pitcher doesn't have any more water. But when we choose to be that overflowing pitcher of water, then that pitcher is always full, and then always has enough from the overflow to give to those cups around it. And it's so simple, and it's in that explanation. But I remember when you said that, and it was like, it was like, what? Yeah, like, of course. I mean, it makes so much sense. How have I not thought about it in that way? And so adjusting the giving to myself, not from a place of selfishness, because, again, that's another thing that we've been taught over and over.
So much.
That when we give to ourselves, that's a form of selfishness.
Yeah.
And to maybe some degree, some giving to self, it can be selfishness. I'm not discounting that in any way, shape, or form.
Well, when it comes from ego.
Right.
When it moves from self-care to self-centered.
Boom. Exactly.
I would offer.
Very well said. Exactly. And so adjusting that, flipping that ideology and that understanding and expanding my awareness of what it meant to actually give to myself, that was truly empowering. That to me was one of the greatest exponential growth in self-love that I had, was just that understanding. Because I could give to myself. That was me being that overflowing pitcher of water, because I knew the more that I was giving to myself through self-love, from a heart-centered giving in gratitude, then the more that I could give to those around me. And then it wasn't just a pitcher, it was that waterfall. And both to myself and to those around me. I knew that the more love I had for myself, the more love I could give to those around me. And through that could then shape my doing and how I expressed that, experienced it, how I gave and received in the physical. And so it was really understanding, to me, balance, to kind of hit the other side of that question, is really about finding the alignment. So giving and receiving, not just from the physical, but as we were talking about earlier, the mental, the emotional, and the spiritual side of giving and receiving, taking the time to reflect and align all the way through. Yes. When we can do that, I mean, that really allows us to truly design our lives in the way and experience our lives in the way that we wholeheartedly desire at the very core of our being. It opens up to things like abundance. As you were saying, when we're giving and receiving, how many times did those experiences where someone gave me a gift or a compliment, and I was like, no. Mm-hmm. How many times did the universe give me something like that, something in kind, something in love, something that I actually desired, and I just went, no.
Yes.
When it started to shift into those kind of things, my unconscious understanding of my unconscious habits were taking over. Mm-hmm. And until I became conscious, became aware, and became more intentional behind how I chose to give and receive, then I felt like the universe was giving me exactly what I was seeking. And then I could receive it in love. I could receive it in kind, receive it in gratitude. And then I could then give back to the universe in the exact same way. And then it created that beautiful cycle.
I love that.
Yeah.
I know one of the ways that we use giving and receiving, especially the journal, is we talk about the giving and receiving. Mm-hmm. And you and I have had this discussion a lot. Just because you give something doesn't mean that the other person received it the way that you intended when giving it, especially when it comes to help.
Yes.
Right? It's only helpful if the person desired the help in the first place.
Right.
So we used the giving and receiving journal in a way to really, as we were coming together in partnership, mm-hmm. to understand what each other found valuable in the giving and the receiving, so that we could create that understanding and awareness. Mm-hmm. It's so, so wonderful that way. But it's also true in business, mm-hmm. or in the community, because we have staff and we can give them a lot of things that we think they would want. Mm-hmm. But if we don't take the time to verify and validate that that's what they desire to receive, then it's really not necessarily going to reach them in the capacity that we're desiring to reach them. So it's so important that in giving and receiving, we take that step and we validate that what we're giving is as valuable as we believe that it will be.
Great point.
When we started doing that, I knew it threw you for a little bit of a loop in the beginning because you're like, wait, what? I just meant this in the most loving way. And I was receiving it in a loving way. But receiving it in a loving way, but finding the same or equal value that you were giving it in was a little bit different. So can you talk about that?
Absolutely. That was another big awakening for me. Only child moments, we'll call it that. Redefining that when we do give, that it's not giving from a place of, oh, I'm giving that person that because that's what I would like to receive. Wow, was that a big one for me personally. Of course, and I'm sure many people can relate to what I'm talking about right now. Because naturally we do want to gift someone that we enjoy, something that we enjoy. Because that's how we understand something. I mean, that's how we relate to the world, is how we understand it, right?
Yeah,
so it's only natural through our lens. Everyone is literally doing that. And there is value in that, 100%. So it's not eliminating that. Just as balance is never eliminating that.
Okay.
It's bringing awareness to, okay, that's where I'm at. Where is she at? Or where's he at? Or where are they at? What would they like and enjoy? What makes them spark? What makes them light up? What connects with them at the level that, I could reflect that within myself, even though it may not be the thing that would do that to me.
Yes.
And by recognizing that and giving in that form, then that's true giving, because that's the purity of it. It's going back to what we talked about in the beginning of this conversation. It's seeing someone for exactly who they are, not who, I want them to be.
Yes.
Even unintentionally, not from an ego standpoint or anything like that, but sometimes we place unintentional expectations on the people around us to behave or respond in a certain way, especially when we give.
Yes.
And then we're just setting ourselves up for disappointment in that way. And so when we can balance that out, balance our ego out, and recognize that when we're giving, it's not about how we receive it or how we would receive it or what we want to get. It's about what that other individual would like, or individuals. Mm-hmm. Then we can still find incredible joy from the purity of giving. And that comes from gratitude, and ultimately that comes from love. That is connecting to love.
It's giving without expectation of the result, right?
Yes.
And so that is another level of giving, and even in receiving, right? When you receive something, if you place an expectation around how you'll receive it, then you're limiting its potential. Yeah. And we talk about this in the Laws of the Universe course that we have.
Right.
Because the universe itself, or God, or whomever it is that your faith opens you up to, if you're putting out that you desire something, that you have a need or a desire, and you're praying or you're just placing it out, and you place an expectation around how you'll receive that, then you're limiting how it can come to you. Yeah. And it may come to you in a grander way than anything you can envision, anything. But if you've narrowed it down, then you've taken that receiving of it completely out of the picture for you. So when we let go of expectations around giving and receiving, then we open ourselves up to something so much more beautiful than we would if we place those expectations on it, which at the core is love, right? We open ourselves up to the loving exchange that is giving and receiving.
So well said. It's a great reflection point even now, just even, we're not always perfect with that, right? And the perfection is not in the doing, it's in the experiencing and the opportunity to continue to get better. To me, that is the perfection in the experience of it, right? And so even now, as you just said that, it's kind of hard not to just step back and just say, wow, what things am I missing? What things am I placing an expectation on the receiving in some way that I'm missing? It's being given to me in a completely different way than I anticipated. And I'm giving that, no, I can't, just like as we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really good.
Thank you. So I know one of the ways for myself, we've talked about this, there are so many levels to who we are as beings. Again, depending on your belief system and how you integrate this being that we are. Yeah. For me personally, I have a belief that we are so much more than just physical. That there are many levels that we flow through to create our physical experience. Yeah. So when I look at giving and receiving, I really take time to look at all layers of that. How am I giving and receiving to my physical form? Am I listening to the messages that my body is sending me? And am I giving back based on the messages that I'm receiving? The same with my vital body. Am I receiving the messages from my vital body and giving back accordingly? My mental body, my supra-mental body, all the way up to my primary consciousness or source consciousness or God consciousness, however we desire to call that. Am I hearing God? And am I providing back to that level? So it's giving and receiving through multiple levels. And if I'm so caught up in the doing and the doing and the doing that I'm not pausing to listen on every level of that self, then how am I potentially missing these messages that I need in order to have that self-care? For me, that is a primary part of self-care. Yeah. So the giving and receiving journal again, or whatever tool might be utilized for that. Some of the things that I do is through a meditation or just taking time to quietly sit and go through every layer of myself and ask the question, is there anything that is needed? Is there anything that's desired? And how can I best provide that for myself right now? And I just go through every layer. Do you have anything that you do that can assist in that way?
Yeah. Meditation is great. And one of the things that I'm actually focusing on in that way is pausing, as you just said. I feel like one of the misconceptions about meditation is that it's a quiet space for no thought. That's a form for sure. But when we take meditation down, at least from my perspective, it's really about being present. Yeah. Sometimes taking a pause in between a question or a thought is that opportunity to access the present and to collect oneself at all levels of self. And so that's definitely a tool that I'm still in progress on and focusing on and integrating. Another one is taking the time to really dive into giving and receiving and finding the balance of that between utilizing my brain and my heart. And I know that's one thing as a heart leader. We talk about heart leaders are, thought and intellect is a huge part. There needs to be, right? But when we compare that with heart and compassion, then the pairing of that becomes incredible. Yeah. It becomes, life-changing in so many levels. And so understanding the giving and receiving relationship between the heart and the brain, that's such a great reflection point, whether that's through meditation or reflection or discussion. And for me, when I do meditate, I really like to, I'm a very visual person. So I like to see this just white light kind of flowing from my brain down into my heart. And that's specifically when I feel like I'm too much up here, when I'm thinking too much, overthinking, analysis paralysis, that kind of deal. And so that's a really, really good one. And I have yet to have the experience of being too much here. I think that's still an opportunity. So we'll get there when that comes. So I don't really have I don't know if that's even a problem. So let's just put it that way. But I do like to see a lot of light come from the heart up into the brain. Yeah. And that's a really good one. And that kind of flows. And I feel like that's me connecting my soul and my very essence of my being and who I am at my most authentic self, coming into the logic and the intellect, which then in return shapes my doing and experiencing.
It's a great tool. Yeah. And it's one that I utilize with clients quite a bit. It's actually from the gut.
Yeah.
We talk a lot about that gut-brain axis, the vagus nerve or vagus nerve going all the way up into the brain. So there's even science and medicine is starting to talk about the gut-heart-brain connection.
Right.
And so in a lot of different Eastern philosophies, they talk about the solar plexus or the gut being knowing of self. That's where if you get a gut reaction or a gut knowing, it's because that's you knowing something's just a little bit off, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you do that meditation that you were talking about where you connect that light between that solar plexus area, the heart and the brain, and you just connect them so that the communication can be given and received between all three, then it is the knowing of self, connecting with your universal connection, your love, connecting with your connection to human awareness, your mind, your thought, your experience here. And so everything can come into whatever balance means for you.
Yeah.
And so running that light between, or the connection between, getting everything synchronized and in a pattern. So I love that tool.
It makes a lot of sense. And it's really, really made a difference for me. And I choose light, and I want to say this because light really is, it gives us life. It is so important that we almost take it for granted. And so when we can focus on light, it is almost like a birthing, like it's life in motion, life in experience. And so for me, I feel like there's such a depth when visualizing light into the heart and into the brain, because it feels like it's igniting the depths within me. And so I wanted to share that, because that way it wasn't just, hey, here's just this kind of thing and that's what I see. But I wanted to show more intention and purpose behind that, because it has been that life-changing for me.
I love it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that you would offer as far as giving and receiving, setting the tone for the month before we begin to wrap up here?
I feel like right now, this time of year, just taking reflection. We are coming into a new year. And one of the key aspects of giving and receiving is taking time to reflect, to understand one's own giving and receiving. And so I feel like that's such a key aspect. We do discuss how giving and receiving is a key attribute of being a heart leader. And the more intention and purpose we have behind how we give and receive to ourselves and to those around us and within, I feel like the greater impact we can have. And so both for me and for anyone listening, I feel like just taking that extra little bit to reflect when giving and receiving this month and just see how that impacts your life and those around you.
Mindfulness, that I think is a wonderful.
Yeah. And heartfulness, right?
And heartfulness.
Yeah.
Yes. Focus.
Focus.
Maybe we just say focus.
Focus.
That way, there's an awareness, a conscious awareness that begins to build from the practice. Mm-hmm. So great final thoughts.
Thank you.
So thank you very much for joining us for this episode of the Heart Leader podcast. We would like to take this moment to thank Stephen Douglas for their kind giving, making this Heart Leader podcast possible. To learn more about all that Stephen Douglas does, you can find them at stephendouglas.com. We'd also like to thank all of you for taking the time to join us each and every week. I am your host, Amber, and this is Austin. And if you would like to learn more about how to give to the Heart Leader podcast, whether it is through sharing this podcast or through donorship and contribution, you can join us at our podcast page at swivera.org. We'd love to hear from you, and we look forward to seeing you in our Swivera community.